Hello, welcome, and sorry. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back to another Maple Bitcoin, not Maple Bitcoin, Maple Bitcoin live stream. I'm joined by my good friends Rajat and Forrest, and today we're going to be talking about Bitcoin treasury companies and if whether or not it could lead to the next collapse within Bitcoin. If there is one, we're going to talk about both. So before everybody gets clickbait comments going in the YouTubes, we hedged our bet with if there is one. So I like starting the show. We did it a couple times now, but let us know in the comments. We see a lot coming in already. Hello, everybody. Let us know where you're watching from today. It's Friday afternoon. We got a couple hours ahead of us talking about Bitcoin and some other things. So let us know where you're watching from today. And Rajat, you want to kick this one off? What's going to happen here with Bitcoin treasury companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to start with saying if you're watching, just leave a thumbs up. Start with that because YouTube will push it to more people. More people will see this content and they'll learn something new. So what I think is going to happen is that there are going to be, so right now all these companies are buying as much Bitcoin as they can, and not all of them understand Bitcoin. Do you guys agree? Like the CEOs, the executives, they don't all understand it.
I'm sure there's a varying degree of understanding.
Varying degree, yes.
Yeah.
So I think what's going to happen is, I mean, I'm sure they understand more than the average person, but I think that if things go badly enough, if the price goes low enough, some of them are going to sell their Bitcoin and they're going to force the price down, or they're not even going to sell it. They're going to get forced to sell it because maybe the debt that they have is badly structured, or they can't afford the payments. They don't have enough cash flow coming in. I think something is going to happen that's going to bring the price down. I mean, I don't know. I could be completely wrong here. Maybe the price doesn't even go below where it is today. Let's say they push the price up to like 500K and then it comes back down to 120K. So regardless, I mean, it'll be higher than what it is today. But I personally think that maybe the next collapse is going to be a result of treasury companies mismanaging their finances and buying Bitcoin that they can't afford, and then having to sell what they have, being forced to sell what they have and being liquidated, and all of that Bitcoin just gets dumped on the market, and we see the spectacular bubble that's going to be created over the next year or so popping. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe I'm thinking of it the wrong way. What do you guys think?
I think if you take a look at it, and everybody can, I mean, I think you guys nailed it there, saying that everybody's kind of in a different spot of understanding. That would be the case for everybody here watching today. Every public company who's buying Bitcoin, every private company that is buying Bitcoin, everybody has a varying degree of knowledge within Bitcoin. And when you're lacking certain aspects of your Bitcoin knowledge, I think that things can go wrong. Maybe you sell a little bit early. Maybe you sell when it's crashing because you don't necessarily understand it. And I definitely subscribe to that theory as well, because if you think about these public companies, like, they have a lot of different things to worry about. They have to worry about their business, their team, their staff, their industry overall. And think about how many hours you've spent in Bitcoin so far and where that's got you. Like, it's not something that you can just half-ass and have a real good understanding of how to protect this thing. And I feel like either these public companies are like hiring somebody else to do it for them, or they're just going into it. There's probably a combination of both there. But I do worry about the ones who don't necessarily know about it and they haven't hired a good team to help them with it. I do think that that's a recipe for disaster in the future.
So I'm going to disagree with you guys here completely. If we look at the public companies, if you want to bring up that chart, the vast majority of the Bitcoin being owned by companies is owned by one equity. So 592,000 Bitcoin owned by Strategy. The next one here, Mara, which is a miner, which has adopted the HODL strategy. Typically in the past, miners have been sellers of the Bitcoin that they've mined. Mara is the second biggest holder at, about 12% of the holdings or so. Yeah, 49,000. No, that's not correct percentage wise, but, a very small amount compared, one Strategy has way more. So
like less than 10%.
Yeah, less than 10%.
Yeah, it'd be less than 10. That's right.
Less than 10% for sure. Because 10% would be 59,000. Okay, so if we look at, if we go down here, again, there's so much less each one we go down. So if any of these companies end up selling the Bitcoin that they've acquired in the next bear market, that isn't going to trigger any sort of cascading downward pressure. It's just minuscule amounts of selling pressure. The only ones that could really affect it are these like top 5, in my opinion, right? We saw it was a different environment, right? We were in a bull market, but we saw Germany part with like 50,000 Bitcoin, and it brought the price down like $10,000. And so, there was the buyers willing to step in at that point. So and prices are always built on the margin, but the way these companies are structured, Strategy, for instance, has around it aims for about 25% leverage. They have roughly 15% leverage right now. And the instruments they have these preferred instruments that have a lot of liquidity, which are debt instruments. So if there's a bear market, and I mean, they have such little operating cost. Their business intelligence software business is basically break even. So there's no cost to very little cost to their business of acquiring Bitcoin. In a bear market, there's no reason for them to sell. There's no liquidation price on their debt. The debt they have is their convertible bonds and their preferred stock offering. There's just no scenario. There's no price that Bitcoin needs to go to for Strategy to start selling their Bitcoin. They can refinance that debt, and that debt is structured out so long. Every single year going into like 2028 is their first convertible debt offering comes due, and it's convertible debt, so they can just issue shares to deal with that. Again, we go down the line here. I just don't see why any one of these companies ends up spitting out the Bitcoin that it's acquired, because of the way the capital markets are designed. If we go into a bear market, that ends up probably correlating with a downturn in the market, which will also correspond with the Fed having to cut interest rates, because they respond to that. Like the stock market and the economy aren't one-to-one, but they are connected. So if the economy starts taking a turn, that's part of the dual mandate of the Fed to have stable prices and stable employment. So if the economy starts taking a dip, they would see some employment issues, and they would start cutting rates, which makes it easier for these companies that have used debt to acquire Bitcoin to refinance their debt, even if Bitcoin's price goes down.
So I want to ask you, do you think that there's going to be no crash, or do you think that there's going to be a crash and it's not going to be caused by the Bitcoin treasury companies?
I hate to say this, but I'm starting to lean into the camp of thinking that there's not going to be a crash. I just don't see the reason for one. The reason for one, the only good reason for one that I see is that the Bitcoin crash can be a self-fulfilling prophecy of people believing that there's going to be one and then causing one to happen. But I don't see Bitcoin treasury companies as being the reason for that. Of course, there are going to be super over-levered, super undereducated Bitcoin treasury companies that might spit their Bitcoin back out, but I just don't think that they're going to have reached the size to make an impact on the market. So I think that has to happen from something else if there is a crash.
So the way that I see it, when Germany dumped their Bitcoin, I don't think we weren't in a bear market. We were in the middle of a bull market, right? So even bad news at that time is a good thing, because people are willing to buy, right? They think, oh, the Bitcoin price is dipping, so I'll buy. So at that time they dumped 50,000 Bitcoin. If Bitcoin goes to the top, and at that point, keep in mind that smaller amounts of Bitcoin are going to be required to bring the price lower. So let's say some company with 10,000 Bitcoin, they're over leveraged. They're forced to sell everything they have. They don't want to go bankrupt, so they just have to sell everything. I think that could have a much bigger impact at the top than $50,000 or 50,000 Bitcoin near the bottom.
I 100% agree with you. And I 100%. Yeah,
like
I did
price is
mention
determined
that.
at the margin kind of thing. Yeah, go ahead.
I did mention that we're in a bull market for Germany, and exactly, price is determined on the margin. So essentially, what you're talking about there is sort of a low liquidity event or a low market action event, and the dominant action being forced sellers from Bitcoin treasury companies. But again, I just think the size of them is going to be small, and maybe they'll have an outsized impact because we're already in a downward trend and there's selling pressure and it's going into the downward momentum, and it can have this kind of cascading effect. But then we have, again, the biggest player in this market has just designed 3 products that they can now use in a bear market, and those products are the only thing they're using now. So what I'm talking about is strategy, using Strike, Strife, and Stride, these preferred stocks. They're no longer selling common stock issuance to buy their Bitcoin. They haven't done so for the past 2 weeks. They've been issuing these debt instruments to buy Bitcoin. And those debt instruments become more effective at acquiring Bitcoin if the price of Bitcoin goes down. So I just think that these larger entrants in this space are going to take advantage of that. If the price is going down, if there are these Bitcoin treasury companies puking out Bitcoin, there's going to be the Bitcoin treasury companies that have designed their business models to be able to acquire Bitcoin in those exact moments, which Strategy has finally done. That's been one of my contentions with Strategy for this while, is in a bear market, their MNAV is going to trade pretty close to 1, potentially. That their strategy, which has largely been an at the market of their common share, falls apart at that point. But now they have the ability to issue basically debt on demand, infinite debt on demand, or not infinite, but non-refinancing debt. So they can just acquire the upfront cash for selling these preferred equities, and they can use that to acquire Bitcoin at any point, regardless of what the common share is doing. Yeah, I think there's more of an argument of something like the owners of the ETFs causing more of a downward trajectory, because potentially they don't know really what they own. They're just buying Bitcoin because of the beta it has on, or the alpha it has on the stock market, right? And it's just like, again, these Bitcoin treasury companies, the well-positioned ones, which the large ones that are actually acquiring Bitcoin at size, Metaplanet, Semler, Strategy, they have real believers of Bitcoin. They have structured their businesses to be very, very low amount of debt. And part of that is the raising value of Bitcoin. But those ones are the biggest entrants into this, and they're the biggest buyers. And so the smaller ones that might have an impact in a bear market still are putting their Bitcoin into a market where there's still these large Bitcoin treasury companies that have no, in my opinion, there's no risk of them having to sell their Bitcoin. Again, there's no terms where their Bitcoin is secured by their debt, where Bitcoin's price goes to a certain point where they get liquidated. I just don't see that happening. So like worst case, maybe they stop buying as much, but they don't have to sell any.
Yeah, that makes sense. So just kind of not to wrap it up, but just to summarize there, it sounds like, Forrest, you're thinking that the top couple companies in Strategy, Mara, and 21 Capital, or top 5, let's say, you think that they do have a really good understanding of Bitcoin. You don't see any risk of them dumping their Bitcoin just because they understand it so well, and therefore they're kind of the only ones who would be able to cause a crash if they decided to. And you're not really fearful of that. Is that kind of what I'm getting from it?
Yeah, and if we added up the top 5 percentage wise, it's going to be like 80-90% of all the
higher.
Bitcoin. Yeah, it's like, it's an insane amount. It's huge compared to all the other ones, right? And really that is what makes a huge difference in this space. Now, if there was something crazy to happen where Strategy has to start selling Bitcoin, then yeah, anything's on the table as far as the bear market. But I just don't see it happening with the way they're structured.
It seems from the conversations that I've had with people as of late, and just watching people online, a lot of people are holding these products like Strategy and Strike and all these different Bitcoin treasury companies with the intention of buying more Bitcoin later. They see it as kind of a fast track to increase the size of their stack. And to me, just that alone makes me a little bit nervous, because that's what happened kind of last cycle, but it was with altcoins instead of these treasury companies. Everybody thought that they were going to shortcut Bitcoin and get ahead of everybody else. And a cheat code essentially to getting more Bitcoin. And when everybody's doing that, that's a recipe, I think, for disaster in itself. And that's what kind of makes me worried about it. But if you play this thing out longer, it's like if everybody in this industry right now, in this world, is doing things like this to try to get more Bitcoin, to me, that just shows how the performance of Bitcoin might actually exceed people's expectations. And I think some of these expectations of strategy and 21 Capital and Metaplanet might actually fall, because if everybody there kind of has that same idea and everybody wants Bitcoin and there's only so much Bitcoin available, to me, they can issue as many stocks they want. And some of these premiums might actually start falling closer to one. And then you're just holding Bitcoin that you don't actually have the keys to. And that disconnect there, I think once more of the retail population understands that, it is a little bit worrisome to me. I think it's going to take quite a while to play out, but that's kind of how what do you guys think about that?
I just want to say one thing there, that the real bear market, like if a bear market starts to happen in Bitcoin, it's not going to force the sale of Bitcoin from these larger ones, in my opinion. But that doesn't mean that it isn't disastrous for the share price of these companies, right? So that is what would take the brunt. And if it takes the brunt, it still doesn't force them to sell Bitcoin and contribute to the downturn of Bitcoin, but the damage is felt on the price of the shares as opposed to Bitcoin's price.
Yep.
Which is kind of what you were saying, but I'm just trying to reiterate it in that way.
I think the sentiment is affected though. The Bitcoin price may not be affected in right away, but I think sentiment is almost like a leading indicator, right? Because if Bitcoin treasury company prices start drop, I get where you're coming from. If Bitcoin treasury company prices start dropping, then people will sell their shares and they'll just buy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the support. But I don't know. I don't know if we're out of the bear markets. I don't know if we're out of the bear markets yet, but who knows?
I think the thing there is, right, is if they sell their shares, that doesn't mean that Bitcoin is being sold. That's what's interesting about Bitcoin treasury companies. It's if you sell your Bitcoin, it means Bitcoin is being sold into the market and it's lowering the price. If you sell your shares of MSTR, it does not mean that Bitcoin is being sold. It's still just being held. It means that their ability to issue shares to buy Bitcoin is going down, but it doesn't actually mean Bitcoin is being sold. So it doesn't have it. There's this buffer between Bitcoin. And I think you're right, Rajat, that there's sentiment and this could drive, lower prices of Bitcoin. And there could literally be a crash just based on sentiment alone. But I do think that the vast majority of Bitcoin held by Bitcoin treasury companies are still going to be held even through a bear market. There might be some selling, there might be some lettuce hands. I don't trust Marathon at all to do anything proper except dilute their shareholders and, pay their executives a huge amount of money.
Is that the worst company to invest in for Bitcoin treasury companies?
Marathon?
Yeah,
in my opinion, rate that one.
It's really low on there. I mean, there's probably a few other worse ones, but it's pretty low. I kind of fell for the idea of, this is like they're trading at their 1 mNAV and they're acquiring Bitcoin, cheaply through their mining operations, but their mining operations are treated as like a negative to their business model. It's
kind of crazy, isn't it? Like, what would be the reason for that? That's what I don't really understand about Mara. Like, why would that be worth nothing? I feel like that's having the infrastructure in place to be able to mine Bitcoin. And, at this stage of the game, I feel like that would be a huge value add. So that's the disconnect for me. I know there's a lot of people who don't really love Mara because for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think they started mining Casper or something last year, which Bitcoiners weren't a big fan of. So that to me was just kind of an instant turnoff. But like, why would a company with so much infrastructure in different parts of the world mining Bitcoin and successfully doing it, how could that be a detriment to their share price?
Do you think it's possible because the mining infrastructure adds risk? As in, over time, okay, so the way that I see the world going, the way that I see Bitcoin going, over time, everybody on Earth is going to have mining infrastructure at their house. And I think that over time, because the subsidy is going to decrease, it's going to stop being worth it for these large institutions to mine Bitcoin industrially. So maybe there's that risk involved because technically, I mean, I think Marathon bought more Bitcoin using debt than the Bitcoin that they kept from their mining operations. So why would anybody want to? I mean, I guess I think that adds a lot more risk, right? The infrastructure, the fact that they have to maintain it no matter what. As even if they keep building their infrastructure with Bitcoin's hash rate increasing, it means that more competition is coming to the market. Then you're going to see, let's say, okay, so right now Marathon may be one of the biggest miners, but at some point, what if countries in the Middle East that produce oil, they start mining? I'm sure they can get ahead of Marathon. Also, the equipment that Marathon has is constantly it's constantly becoming obsolete. So they're able to hold on to a smaller portion of the mining, the hash rate. So over time, I don't know. It sounds risky to me. It sounds like they're slowly going obsolete unless they keep investing more and more of their Bitcoin into the mining infrastructure. And at a point, the way, I mean, again, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think at a point, people aren't going to be mining Bitcoin to make profit. They're going to be mining Bitcoin just like a lottery.
And a subsidy too.
Yeah.
If you need the heat,
yeah.
I guess not in all parts of the world, they wouldn't necessarily need the heat, but like the Northern Hemisphere, even if you're, in a mild climate, I think it makes sense to have some mining equipment just to subsidize the energy costs. Because why would you just pay for a furnace, for example, to heat your house instead of doing it with a Bitcoin miner and actually subsidizing the energy costs of heating your house?
Yeah. So with Mara, Rajat mentioned sort of like the depreciation of their equipment. They have older equipment that they run at cheaper energy costs, and they don't constantly upgrade their equipment. So the market is not loving the strategy that they're doing, which is just maintaining their Bitcoin mining business and then holding their Bitcoin, right? They're not agreeing with this strategy that they're doing currently.
Yeah.
And they've funded their business operations because there's a serious cost to their business operations, right? All the warehousing, the employees, the electricity costs. If they're not selling their Bitcoin, they have to fund it somehow. And the way they fund it is with dilution. They dilute their shareholders, which lowers the price of the shares, which makes it for a shareholder not to have an incentive to hold those shares if they're just constantly being diluted. And they're not acquiring Bitcoin at size. They did do a convertible bond and bought Bitcoin with it, but they're not actively doing that. They're not like just hammering it like MSTR. So people that are investing in Bitcoin treasury companies, there's sort of like the idea of MSTR, winner takes most, buy this, we kind of know what they're doing. Or there's let's jump on the faster train, high Bitcoin yield of something like XXI or a Metaplanet that is acquiring a ton of Bitcoin. And maybe we can see outsized returns with that. So Mara sort of fits in this middle ground where it's like this no man's land that nobody wants it because it's not doing either of the things well. It's not a super high efficient Bitcoin miner, and it's not a rapid debt acquiring, Bitcoin acquiring strategy company. So it's kind of the worst of both worlds. They kind of think, oh, this is this hybrid strategy. We're the best because we do that. That's what their marketing is, but they're the worst because they do that. The other thing too is like Mara has serious potential because George, you did hit on like it seems very mispriced, and I would say it actually is. I would say it is for two reasons. The mining operation is profitable, like in a sense currently. So if somebody wanted to acquire it, like somebody else, like maybe even a nation, right? If it could be literally become like nationalized by like the U.S. government, for instance, their operations, or they have some operations in like Paraguay, right? If they sold that arm off, they could sell it at a premium because mergers and acquisitions are usually at like a 30% plus of what it's currently trading at. So they could sell at a premium just based on getting acquired. Because they're trading so close to their value of their Bitcoin. The other thing they have pretty decent electricity agreements, and there's a huge amount of electricity demand by hyperscalers and data centers for AI. So they could just pivot to that, as many other miners have, or they could sell those agreements to other companies and they could make a profit there. But they're just kind of sitting on their laurels as far as what I see, and they're not being rewarded for just like we're a Bitcoin mining company. We're mining a bit of Caspa and we're buying a little bit of Bitcoin and we're just holding. Like it's just not a narrative that's hitting anybody with any enthusiasm.
It does seem that way because to me, strategy is mining Bitcoin as well. They're just doing it through financial products.
100%.
So with that, like when you compare just those two alone, you look at strategy who has almost 600,000 Bitcoin now, or they might have 600,000 now. Take a nap and MicroStrategy has more Bitcoin, but like they're essentially mining Bitcoin with financial products. There's way less risk involved there. I mean, as long as you subscribe to the theory that the bond market is way oversaturated and nobody really wants to be in there, there's no better options and people are going to flow into strategy there. There's less risk involved. There's less maintenance. There's less geographical risks. This is something that is in cyberspace essentially versus something that's in the physical world. And I agree with both of you guys there. I do think that every person on the planet is going to be mining Bitcoin just because it's going to make sense. It's going to be like a lottery ticket, or it's going to either subsidize your energy costs because it just makes sense. And so in that sense, maybe it doesn't make as much economic sense for a large company. Like I really see Bitcoin mining decentralizing over time because it's going to make more sense. Bitcoin mining will find the cheapest source of energy. And I don't even think we're close to that yet. And so somebody like Mara, for example, they've already kind of planted their flag in certain parts where in a couple of years from now, a smaller, more scalable and flexible and agile company comes along with a much lower energy cost, they're going to blow these guys out of the water. And there's nothing they're going to be able to do about it either. So it is risky. I understand that, but it is kind of just weird that it is trading at such a discount compared to the other ones.
Yeah, it is weird.
Oh, so I just want to mention, somebody mentioned in the chat there that there was a video about it was from Vulgar Beats. He said Mark Moss just made a video pitching these companies as outperforming Bitcoin. That's perfectly fine. They can outperform, but I don't care about the short term. I care about the long term. I care about 30 years from now. How many of those companies are going to be around? I know that Bitcoin is going to be around because of how Bitcoin is designed. How many of those companies are going to be around in 30 years? In the short term, they may outperform perfectly fine. But if you're looking for short-term returns, you're kind of gambling.
100%.
Even if you buy MetaPlanet, if you buy MicroStrategy, in a way you're gambling, right? Even MicroStrategy, as powerful as they are, they're an investment. They're not a savings vehicle. That's the difference, right? When you have Bitcoin, you have a savings vehicle. When you have MicroStrategy, when you have MetaPlanet, when you have all these Bitcoin treasury companies, you're buying a bet that they'll outperform Bitcoin. And it's possible that they don't. That's definitely possible. They may not outperform even for the next year. Like for all we know, MicroStrategy's MNAV could fall down to 1. And in that time, right now, if it's at 1.6, 1.7, in that time, it means that it's lost 70% of its value in terms, or not 70%, whatever the calculation is, it's lost that value in terms of Bitcoin.
Yes. And if you think about it this way too, this is kind of, because I did a video on the channel yesterday talking about Bitcoin versus crypto. Forrest would know this one, Bitcoin, not crypto, but I did a comparison and the two of them there, a big one that really stood out to me is I compared Bitcoin and crypto and I said, Bitcoin's a protocol like the internet, like email. It's going to be around for a very long time. Protocols are much different than technologies and companies. And I said, like some of these cryptocurrencies, they might be around in 5 years, but they might not be because there's always going to be somebody newer coming up who's going to do it better and faster and cheaper than these companies and cryptos that are here today. So I look at Bitcoin as a protocol, just like email, just like the internet. And I look at other cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin treasury companies like a technology in a way where they're blockbuster today. And at some point, there's going to be a new blockbuster that Netflix is going to come along and replace Ethereum and replace Solana and replace MetaPlanet. That's what happens when you have these centralized companies involved in this. It's much different. It's not decentralized like Bitcoin is. It's not a protocol like Bitcoin is. And I think that the further we get into this, more and more people are going to understand that. And that's going to slow down some of these premiums over time. They might still even go up as more and more people even discover them. But over the long run, I think that the premiums are going to fall. Everybody's going to realize that Bitcoin is the asset that you actually want to hold. And I think that that's going to have a big impact on Bitcoiners today who are here.
As far as like the outperforming idea of these Bitcoin strategy Bitcoin strategy companies, it's there's very, very few cases out there for investments or places to put your money where you're just given free outperformance without taking on additional risk. So yes, there's entirely the possibility that these outperform for some duration of time. Maybe even like maybe strategy will just perform so well as a company. The next CEO after Fong, chairman Saylor retires, they just keep hitting it super well and they keep doing super well. Is that going to last decades, centuries, eons, millennials, millenniums? Like Bitcoin has the potential to last that long.
Yes.
Right? Strategy, it's much less likely. And yeah, I mean, we're not going to last that long either. Like we have an expiry as individuals. So, you play your games within certain time periods and evaluate all of that. But there is very, very few cases out there where you're going to get outperformance without taking on additional risk. And with Bitcoin treasury companies, you're 100% taking additional risk compared to just owning Bitcoin. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that people are going to run there over time. Okay, we got a couple questions here I want to touch on. Ryan says, how many sad donations for Jordan Rajat to jump on the mustache train? It'd have to be a pretty big one for me. What do you think, Rajat? Oh, you're muted.
I'd say at least 10 million.
10 million.
10 million.
Wow. And you know what? I'll do 10 million to grow a beard.
Whoa. Okay. That's
yeah,
fun.
I'd do it for less than 10 million sats. I'd probably take 1 million sats for an episode with a mustache.
Shave your beard.
Oh yeah, I guess that's tough. Like I honestly haven't shaved my beard in probably 10 years. So
yeah,
maybe let's go 2 million sats.
Wow. This guy's a sellout.
Okay, and I want to talk about a couple more things here quickly on this little commercial break. Mikkel, it's my birthday, last one before 30, and I wouldn't want to spend it any other way than watching some Maple Bitcoin with the boys. Honestly, this channel and these guys keep me sane every week. Thanks. Well, thank you, Mikkel, and happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
29. What a year to be alive. We got a couple more here too. The QR code right beside Rajat's head there is active. We are checking on things here. And we got a couple fat zaps here to report, boys. We got a 10,000 sat zap from Letha the Icon. It says, from Letha, thank you for the information, boys. 10,000 sats. Wow.
Thank you so much for the support, Letha. And
we got 1,900 sats sent anonymously.
Oh.
And also a fatty here. Fat. 333. Second week in a row. And wow. I think I have an idea who this is from. We have a row of ducks, which is 2222. And this one, if you look at threes sideways, you guys can guess what this would be, a row of either butts or breasts. That's what he wanted to
that's so funny
to mention in there. So big thanks. I'm pretty sure I know who that is from, but 333,000 sats. That's a big one.
Wow.
That's insane.
That's huge.
Massive.
We appreciate it.
Yes, very much. And I think I just saw another one come in here. So where should we go from here, boys?
I just want to say this keeps us going, right? It makes us want to keep creating content, and we don't have any sponsors. We haven't even looked for sponsors. That's the funny part. Yeah. The show is we started doing it because we found it fun, but now we spend so much time doing it every week. These just give us a reason to keep going.
Yes,
absolutely.
100%. Okay, so where should we go from here, boys? I saw a couple good questions, actually.
Yeah, let's do the questions. The last couple of weeks, we haven't really been able to answer them.
Yeah. First of all, somebody said, what? So Dripmeister says, hello, welcome, and sorry, Jor, what does this mean? Great job, guys. Love this channel. Keep up the good work, guys. Love you all. I don't really know what it means. I mean, we're three guys from Canada, 3 Canadians. So we just kind of said it the first show, and then we just kept saying it, or I just kept saying it. So in Canada here, we are known for being a little bit more friendly. We say sorry a lot, even when it's not our fault with things. So that was kind of a nice touch there for our Canadian roots.
I think it's also because we start a couple minutes late every week. So
yeah, true. Very true. Okay, Rajat, somebody had a question for you here. DJ 2600 says, Rajat, you said a Bitcoin crash is coming. So is it even worth it to stack sats at this amount or this moment, maybe? Or to your logic or just predictions, wait for the crash?
that 100% is still worth it, because I don't know if there's going to be a crash or not. I mean, like I said, I mentioned in the beginning, what if Bitcoin goes to like 500K, then a 75% drop brings it down to 125K? At that point, you're going to be wondering, oh, why didn't I buy at 103K? Right? So nobody knows if there's going to be a crash. I don't know if there's going to be a crash. I don't even know if there's going to be a 50% crash. So regardless of what I think, those are me, that's just my emotions, right? I'm just thinking, okay, this is the way that I see it going. I could be completely wrong, and I know that. I know that for a fact. I would say keep stacking regardless. It doesn't really matter. Hold for the way that I see Bitcoin is, whenever I buy it, I think about how I'm going to be wrong and I'm going to feel stupid for the next 4 years. And then after that 4 years, I'll be great. I'll be doing perfectly fine. But those next 4 years, you have to be ready to feel to look stupid, right? So you have to keep buying regardless of if there's a crash. If there's a crash, then that's even better for you. But if there's a crash and you don't have any Bitcoin, you're going to keep thinking, I want it to go lower. I want it to go lower. If you have Bitcoin and there's a crash, you're going to think, I want to bring my average price lower. But if you don't have any Bitcoin, you're going to think it's going to go lower. It's going to go lower. I was right all along. So if you don't have any Bitcoin, you're going to end up with no Bitcoin, even if there's a crash. If you have Bitcoin, you're going to end up with more Bitcoin if there's a crash. So I would say keep stacking. Stacking Bitcoin should be something that you do regardless of the price. It doesn't matter what the price is. You should be buying Bitcoin no matter what, because it's your retirement plan. It's your savings vehicle. It's your way to get value moved from today into the future. So you create something of value today, you produce value, you spend less than you earn, you delay gratification. You want to make sure that delayed gratification moves to the future. If you don't buy Bitcoin, basically what you're doing is you're betting on pieces of paper to increase in value against the most valuable asset in the world. Do you think that's going to happen? You're also betting that fewer papers are going to exist in the future if you think that Bitcoin is going to guarantee a crash. How do you know that's going to happen? That in order for that to happen, companies have to go bankrupt. In order for that to happen, interest rates have to go way higher. And for all we know, that may not happen.
Yeah, and the thing there, right, is there's a strategy called dollar cost averaging, which is basically just buying a regular amount throughout time. And this is like, your question there was sort of had the tone of like a little bit of, anxiety about the market, like trying to time it, trying to like worrying, what should I do kind of thing. With the dollar cost average strategy, it's actually not the most efficient, but it doesn't really matter, because it makes it so that you're emotionally detached from it. You can just automate it and you can just let it roll. And then again, with what Rajat said, he holds it for 4 years. He has the idea of holding it for at least 4 years. The reason you do that is there is not a single moment in Bitcoin's history where you can take a consecutive four-year period and have a lower price at the end of the 4 year compared to when you bought it at the beginning of the 4 year. Even if you bought at the absolute high of a 4 year cycle, it's still higher after 4 years. So that is why, if you just have that mentality, if you're able to do that, and again, there's that caveat, if you're able to do it. So if you are buying Bitcoin, but then, you have to sell it, become a forced seller, there's the possibility, because of the volatility, that you might have to sell it at a lower price. But if you're stacking an amount that makes it so that you can hold it for 4 years or longer, you're absolutely going to be solid. And that's historically what the evidence has shown.
Yeah, Bitcoin is a savings account. It's I think the US debt just hit $37 trillion this week. It's like you're essentially, every time you buy some Bitcoin with fiat, you're essentially betting that system is going to die one day. And I'm going to be buying Bitcoin forever. I've been buying Bitcoin for the last 5 years at 69,000, and then at 15,000, and then back at 69,000, and then 110,000. It's not, the fiat price is a complete illusion. Just start there. Really, like when you're measuring things in a unit of account that we have no idea how many units actually exist, it's an impossible and useless metric. And so just focus on getting as much as you can. And some days you're going to get a little bit less with your dollars. Some days you're going to get a little bit more with your dollars. But if you compound that over time, you're going to see a significant increase in purchasing power over time, in a world that, if you're outside of Bitcoin, is getting increasingly expensive to live in. So there's no good time to buy. You should never have a bunch of cash on the sidelines waiting for Bitcoin. That's just from my own experience, because we might never see another bear market again. It's funny that we're spending so much time talking about bear markets and crashes here when we haven't even seen the bull market. Like if the price today was 250,000 or 400,000, I'd be like, yeah, okay, when's the bear market coming? But like this thing hasn't even started. So if you're waiting for it to drop down to 50,000 or $70,000, I think you're wishing. So just like go under the assumption you're going to hold this thing for at least 4 years. You're going to come out ahead. After that 4 years, you're probably going to hold it for 40 years. And your family, hopefully, if you do it right, will never have to sell that Bitcoin ever. And when they do have to sell some of it, they're going to get, like we said last time, a tank of gas for 50 sats. So it's going to be a very small sliver of what you've accumulated so far.
Yeah.
I see there's a question or a couple different things here that I want to mention. Oh, Mark, that's who it was. That's who I thought it was. So Mark was the one who sent the row of breasts for the guys from Canadian. So
Nice.
Thank you, Mark, and his beautiful golden retriever there named Bella. I've had a couple different interactions with Mark. So thank you. That's 2 weeks in a row. Huge zap for the guys from Canadian.
Insane. Mark's a legend.
Awesome. Okay, we got another super chat here. Forgot one at the top, which was from the Gronky Tonk Man. Look at that. That's a great profile pic and name. And Nav says, BTC has shown me that everyone is an NPC or a bot. Interesting. So thank you for the super chats there, fellas.
Can we talk about that a little bit? I actually agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, let's go.
Most people are. I've seen that. Like if you mention even simple things to them, they don't get it. They don't want to, right? They don't want to change their opinions. They don't want to, even if they have more knowledge, they don't want to let go of their beliefs. Would you guys agree?
Well, yeah. I mean, why do you guys think that? Like, to me, what it is that nobody wants to even understand money. Like, nobody's asking what money is. They just use money. They access their bank. They put money in their bank. They work 40 hours a week to acquire money. It's like one of the most important things. It's what we spend so much of our time trying to acquire. And yet nobody asks the question or really questions what money ever is. And do you think that's just like some like cultural thing, or that we're just born into money, so we just don't question it? Like we're born into using money, I'm saying. Like why aren't people questioning this? Why when somebody talks about Bitcoin, when I talk about Bitcoin, the biggest resistance I get is not Bitcoin specifically. It's just about talking about money. People don't want to talk about money in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they fall asleep when they watch finance videos. They fall asleep. They don't want to. I think it's because they haven't thought. They're not told to.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where the NPC thing comes from.
Right.
Exactly.
They're not told. Their controller, whoever is controlling them, isn't putting in the command to think about money, so they don't do it.
It's not one of the options for like the the interaction
for
options.
Conversation. Yeah. It's not one of the options. And I mean that's part of it, right? Because it's actually really boring to be talking about economics, to learn about economics if you don't look at it from a conspiracy theory kind of standpoint. Right?
Yeah.
If you just look at and most average people will think that Bitcoin is a conspiracy theory. It's too good to be true. It's not going anywhere. So to them, it's not worth their time. It's not worth their energy. So they don't care. Even when I used to talk about personal finance, I used to only talk about personal finance. This is before I started talking about Bitcoin. Even then, people would, they would always say, "Oh no, I don't have enough money. I don't have enough money.
Right.
I can't invest. There's not enough money that I can, because I can't pay for my bills." I mean, in that case, increase your income. I know that's a hard thing to say. I know that's very difficult, but what else, what other outlet do you have? You can't rely on your government. Your government's not going to support you. So what are you going to do? Are you just going to keep struggling for the rest of your life? So the options are either you increase your income and you put in a little bit more work to increase your income, or you struggle for the rest of your life and you keep struggling and you keep complaining and you don't change anything. I personally would choose the first option, where I increase my income, I put in more work, I create more value, and that requires you to not be an NPC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's also this like, what you mentioned there is there's like a lot of like mental negativity based around money, even if it's subconscious, even if they're not thinking like, oh, I hate money or I hate the idea of money or whatever. It's just like money's a struggle. right? And money's
Yep.
something negative in their life. And then if you talk about money, people don't want to talk about something that's negative in their life in that way. It's because it's real and it's suffering and it's kind of true. And they would rather just talk about like surface stuff. That's
Sports.
what I
Yeah.
see. Yeah, sports, celebrity, whatever, right?
Nothing wrong with that. I'm not even saying, okay, don't talk about sports. I'm not saying that. I'm saying
Yeah.
you have to have the balance. Like talking about sports is fine. For example, when people talk to me about sports, I have no clue what they're talking about. I have no idea. I have no idea who won last year. I have no idea who won this year. I know Florida won a few days ago in the NHL.
Buggers.
But I have no idea other than that information. I don't know who won last year. I don't know who won the year before. So it's kind of hard to have those conversations. So I guess even Bitcoiners need to find the balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes even
agree
Bitcoiners,
with
they go
that.
too far from not being an NPC.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
I've
definitely.
noticed that.
I struggle with that personally. Like
Yeah.
it's hard for me to have very surface level conversations. I'm just like, yeah, but what about money printing?
Yeah.
Like I just shoehorn that in.
Everything leads to Bitcoin, right? Even
Yeah.
like if you think about it, even if somebody talks about sports, it makes me think, okay, the reason why sports are so common and so many people watch sports is because they're not very happy in their life. They don't want to spend life in their current present because it's so stressful.
It's a distraction.
Right. It's a way to get out of your current life. But then again, I mean, it's fun to watch. People like watching sports. But then there's also the other aspect of things where the system is designed to keep you poor, because have you seen how many gambling ads there are on sports now?
Oh yeah,
How many men are addicted to gambling?
absolutely.
Probably
Yeah.
probably a lot, like a lot
Yeah.
of people, right? And
I know like
I
a
guess,
handful personally.
Same.
yeah. And why do people gamble? It's because they don't have any. They don't have.
They don't have
They
hope.
want a shortcut.
It's
They don't
hope.
have hope. Yes, exactly. That's the right word. I was going to say something like, "Oh, they don't have the potential to earn money," but they do. But they don't have
Mhm.
hope. You're right. They don't
Yeah.
have hope. They want a shortcut.
It's
Not even.
desperation. Yeah.
I don't even know if they want a shortcut. I think that this is the only way for them to do it.
That's
'Cause
what they
if-
think. They think they
Right.
need luck. They think they need a lottery ticket. They think they need to do a crazy parlay that hits. Like that's
Right.
their way out,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
It's just yeah.
And
It's
I
depressing.
mean, who
It's
can
pretty
really
depressing.
blame them, right? Who can really blame them because they have a fixed income, they're working a job, and their expenses are increasing constantly. Like if you're paying your rent and it increases by $200 a month, and your income doesn't increase by $200 a month, how are you going to make up for that difference?
Yeah.
You have to cut something out,
You got to spend more time working.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
if you
got to
think
lower
about
your life or work harder. It's just it's terrible.
Yeah.
If you think about what that NPC meme is, it's like there's a chip in somebody's head where somebody's programming them what to think and what to do. And that's
Yeah.
that's reality. I mean, even us three we have that same chip in our heads where everything that we consume every day, our environment, that's what really programs our own code within us. And
Mhm.
so it's intentional. When you grow up and you go through the school system, they intentionally leave out the monetary aspect of it. They don't want to teach you where money comes from, the ins and outs of the whole system, because then people would be like, what the hell's going on? Like, I think it was Henry Ford or somebody who said, if the people understood central banking and fractional reserve banking, there'd be riots in the morning. So they intentionally feed you information that distracts you from that. They make it a sensitive subject. They kind of program that in us from a very young age. And it takes a lot of work to actually break free of that. And I think that we are NPCs maybe in Bitcoin in a way, because we are programming our minds differently. We're taking a different programming, different code. But there's this quote here from Ayn Rand, and it said, "We can ignore reality, but we cannot ignore the consequences of ignoring reality."
Nice.
So that's kind of exactly what's happening right now. There's a lot of people who don't want to talk about money. They don't want to learn about Bitcoin. They think that it's going to go away, but they're going to be faced with the consequences of ignoring reality at some point. I'm a firm believer that Bitcoin's going to make everybody's lives better, but they're not going to get as far ahead. They're not going to get as many sats. They're not going to have this pristine collateral that the people who are here today have the benefit of having because of the consequences of ignoring what's going on here. So it's kind of a short-term thing, but it's going to have long-term consequences, I think, for these people who are continually ignoring what's happening right now, reality.
I think part of it could also have to do with people just not having the time and energy to study Bitcoin. Like I know a lot of healthcare workers who they work a lot and they're stressed out and they don't want to spend their time learning about finance because if you a lot of the content related to Bitcoin, it kind of gives you a negative perspective of the world today, and they don't want that. But then it goes back to that quote: "You can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality." And that's so true, because even these people who are doctors, they spent 30 years educating themselves. They're finally making a good income, but they're struggling. Like, I've seen doctors who are making 200-300K, and they spent so long trying to get to where they are today, but because of the financial system, because they can take on debt, they do it, and they're struggling to just pay back their loans every year, and they're just doing that the whole time. They don't really have anything else to look forward to.
And when you're kind of in that system, and you've worked your way up in that system, there's sort of like the sunken cost fallacy. There's like, again, you're probably overworked, overtired, and your job probably doesn't allow for the ability. Like, there's a lot of BS jobs out there that,
Yeah.
like, every job I've ever had has been BS before I started my business.
Mine too.
I had jobs where I could listen to stuff. So I would download audiobooks on business, entrepreneurship, all this stuff prior to Bitcoin. And I had a landscaping job. I just put my headphones in, then the earmuffs, and just like cut grass or whatever. And I just like, I would download this information of like how to improve my life financially and all this kind of stuff. And Rajat, you just had a video, I think, about how you were talking about when you were an Uber driver and you were able to listen to just Bitcoin podcasts over and over.
Yeah.
It's over. It's like a
Yeah.
doctor can't do that, right? These
Yeah.
people that have worked their way into these systems and have salaried jobs where they're important in their job and all this, it's hard for them to like step outside of that and start learning about something completely different that isn't about their work. So it's like the plebs, the people with BS jobs out there can have an opportunity for listening to us, or scrolling Bitcoin Twitter and Reddit and all this kind of stuff, and just start learning. Like, I think there is an advantage to that.
And keep in mind, we're not trying to insult you for your job. We're not saying that your job is bullshit, so you're a bad person. I had a bullshit job. I worked in finance. They create inflation, then they give you the solution for inflation. So I had a complete BS job. If it weren't for fiat currencies, my job wouldn't even exist. If it weren't for fiat currencies, our current jobs wouldn't even exist. Like the stuff that we're doing right now, we wouldn't need to teach you about Bitcoin, because you'd probably be saving in Bitcoin already, or gold maybe. I don't know what else you'd be saving in, but we wouldn't have this kind of system where we need financial advisors to help you invest, to help you put your money away. We wouldn't need all of this.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. Bitcoin is like, Bitcoin was created as a solution to a problem. And that problem is largely like financial illiteracy. Like the financially literate, even prior to Bitcoin, were able to protect themselves and grow their wealth. And the financially illiterate are the ones that suffer. Yeah. And Bitcoin is just the best instrument for saving. But there are other instruments that people use to save their purchasing power. They cause terrible knock-on effects, in my opinion. Like saving in a house causes, cost of living to increase, and whereas saving in Bitcoin doesn't negatively affect anybody else. So there's a lot of reasons, just ethically, for moving to Bitcoin, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, that's just a huge problem. Just like the financial literacy rates are very, very low.
I feel like you made a great point there. If people own Bitcoin, if let's say the billionaires buy all the Bitcoin, it doesn't really hurt anybody else. It doesn't really, because you don't need Bitcoin to live, right? You don't need, you do need a house to live. You don't need Bitcoin to live. You do need cars to travel to work. You do need food, for example. You need that, but you don't need Bitcoin to live. So I think what you're saying there's that the moral side of things, and Bitcoin fixes all that.
100%. Yeah.
There's no excuses anymore. That's the thing that I'm hearing here, is like, it doesn't matter if you're a nurse, because I've spent some time in the last couple months here in the hospitals, and the healthcare workers I have so much respect for. They do a very hard job, very, very difficult job. It is not easy. But the thing that really drives me nuts about stuff like that, and this is pretty consistent, I think, throughout, whether it's healthcare or financial, whatever, people take their half an hour breaks and they just sit there and gossip with each other. They waste half an hour just to, complain about the world. And they, instead of, studying or listening to a podcast or reading a book, like, there's no excuses for not seeing what's going on in the world right now. It seems like people are intentionally ignoring it. And that's what really bothers me. It's like, we say that nobody has time, but everybody has time. People just have different priorities. And if you care about your future, if you care about your family, you should be taking some time, even if it is half hour on your work break, to study and learn what's going on here, or just find something that you can do to stack more Bitcoin, because there's no sense in wasting time scrolling on TikTok or Instagram or gossiping with your coworkers. It's so unproductive. It's actually reverse productive, whatever that would mean, unproductive.
Yeah.
But everybody has the ability. There's so much information online now. There's no excuses for somebody to continue ignoring the transition that we're living through right now.
And you're not going to be force fed this stuff, right? Like, Jory, you mentioned how, like, the system, the schools and everything, they don't teach you this, and it's intentional. And it's intentional because if they did, it would create chaos within the financial system, which that chaos is deserved, right? The system is against us. The fiat system is against us as individuals. It needs to be broken. Luckily, we're building, and we're not trying to fix that system with Bitcoin. We're building an entirely different system, and we're just allowing the other one to just break on its own because of how flawed the incentives are within it. So, but again, so what I'm saying here is, no one's going to teach you these things. You have to actually take the initiative to learn them. And unfortunately, like, that's sort of the NPC, back to the NPC kind of thing, right? Is like, NPCs aren't actively going out and seeking information and being curious about the world in all sorts of different ways. But if you are that way, you're going to benefit a lot compared to the people that aren't, whether it's nurture, nature, the reason that they're not like that, but whatever. But I mean, you're here already. You're probably more open-minded than the vast majority of people out there.
That comment from Krav, the one with the $5 super chat, it works perfectly in this case. People grow up seeing money depicted as a dirty, evil thing. They subconsciously see it as corrupt and corrupting without going further and asking why. Perfect. That's
100%.
such a great way to say it. I thank you for that comment. People do feel that way. People feel like, oh, getting wealthy is not a good thing. They think billionaires are terrible. But you have to understand that, okay, maybe billionaires aren't the best, but they had to do something to get there. They did exploit people, like they exploited their, let's say, their labor, but they had to do something to get there, right? They had to actually create something of value. Like, people don't like Jeff Bezos, for example. They don't like him. I don't know him. I don't know how he is as a person, but he created something of value. He created the biggest e-commerce website in the world. And where is it today? How many people did he create value for? He only owns like 10% of the stock, 9 or 10% of the company. So I think Amazon is worth like $2 trillion or something today, maybe 1.9 trillion dollars. So he's gotten $190 billion out of Amazon, but he's created multiple millionaires out there. He's created value. What's 1.9 trillion minus 1.9 billion? 1.71 trillion. So he's created $1.71 trillion worth of value for other people, and he's never going to touch that value. So don't think of money as dirty, evil. It's not corrupt. It's not corrupting. Money, you can do whatever you want with money. So over time, if you wanted to, let's say you have Bitcoin. Your Bitcoin goes to $1 million, $10 million, $100 million. Eventually it will. You may not be able to spend it on yourself. Improve the world. Make the world a better place. Build community centers. Build parks. Build schools, better schools. Build hospitals. Do whatever you can to make it so that future generations get to have a better world than you lived in. So regardless of what you think of the world today, improve it for future generations.
Yeah, money is I mean, we're taught at a young age that money is the root of all evil, which comes from the Bible, which is wrong. I've learned later in life that's not what the actual phrase is from the Bible. But I do think that fiat money is the root of all evil. The ability for people to create money and basically steal other people's times, that is the root of all evil. And so Bitcoin is the antidote to that. And people have different opinions on Bitcoin being spirituality and the religion ties to it. We're not going to get into that, but it is one of those things that we're taught at a young age that it is evil, but it's not. It's basically just a transfer of energy. It's an IOU for something that you've done for future benefit for you. That's all that it is. If you get money from somebody, it means you've done something of value for them. And that money is the way to transfer that. Fiat money is shitty. It is evil. But that's not, has nothing to do with money. It's just a form of money. Bitcoin is also a form of money. We shouldn't be talking about money in a bad way. You should be adding as much value to the world. And the more value that you add to the world, the more value you get back in the form of money. And hopefully you convert that into Bitcoin over time.
Yeah.
Well said.
So thank you for the super chat there and the comment. That was great, Krav. Thank you. We get another big super chat here that we should touch on, which is from Michael Davis. $20 for the channel. Look at that nice big orange super chat on the screen. Michael says, thoughts on Strike Lending offering loans at 12% when the 10-year Bitcoin CAGR is 83%, perhaps leveraging 10% of your stack. What do you guys think about this? I know one of you has changed your mind on this a little bit lately.
Yeah,
I think it could work. I think it could work really well. I think, I mean, you keep in mind that you're risking 10% of your stack, so you could lose that 10% of your stack. So keep in mind that you are taking risk here. It's not free, because if Bitcoin has a scam like down, you could lose your stack, right? So that's something that you have to remember. But when you use that loan to buy Bitcoin, you're buying a leveraged position in Bitcoin. So not only does the Bitcoin that you have decrease in value, but also the Bitcoin that you borrowed also or that you bought with the borrowed funds, it also decreases in value. So over the long term, it might work. But in the short term is when you may have a little bit of difficulty, because in the short term, Bitcoin's price could do whatever happens, right? It could drop 50% tomorrow for all we know. I don't think that's going to happen, but it could, right? And if it drops 50%, not only do you have to pay back your loan, you lost your 10% of your stack. You have to pay capital gains on that 10% of your stack if it gets liquidated. So you have to think about the risks and the rewards. Are you going to be able to survive if Bitcoin's price falls? Is that something that you can deal with and you'll be okay with? I think that's the key.
Yeah, and with these loan structures, there is warnings of when you're below your loan to value, or when your loan to value is too high, or whatever it is, and you have to add more to not get liquidated, basically. So that is something you really want to be careful of. That's something you want to have Bitcoin on the side that isn't tied up in any way, that's very easily accessible, so that you don't lose your stack. You're not a forced seller, because within a year, right, if you only have this, I think they're yearly loans actually, and then you kind of have to refinance them and pay them out at the end of the year, or maybe they're paid monthly. There's different structures for them. But at the end of the year, Bitcoin could be below what you bought it at, and what you're loaning at, and that you're paying 12% for that Bitcoin, and then it's you say 83% CAGR on 10-year. It's the CAGR is going down because the adoption cycle and all that is changing, but you're also losing 12% on that gain that you're having. So you have to factor that in. So if Bitcoin only increased at 12% and your loan was 12%, it makes no sense, right? It makes no sense at that point. You're just even. Yeah. So yeah, in theory, it makes a lot of sense, but just have the protection to be able to top up your balance and be able to potentially roll it out if the timing is off for the appreciation of the asset, and expect it to be a long-term play, and that you need to handle the volatility, because by pushing out the time frame, that's helping you with that one risk, which is short-term volatility risk of the asset.
Yes, great point. That's what you should be looking at when you're looking into lending against Bitcoin, is the terms. And I do think it's a smart idea right now. Personally, I would lean towards more of like a HELOC. If you are somebody who has equity in a house, I would lean more towards getting a home equity line of credit and buying Bitcoin. It also depends how much Bitcoin you have. Like if you already have, say, half a Bitcoin or like a full Bitcoin, is it worth the risk to get that a little bit further ahead? If this thing plays out like we think it, like, I think about this all the time. I think, you know what? I don't have enough Bitcoin. I see people online. I know, how much people have. I'm like, I don't have enough Bitcoin. I need to do more. But then I'm like, if this thing works out, like I think it's going to work out, I have more Bitcoin than I'm ever going to even, want to have, essentially. Right. So, it really depends on how much you have. It depends on your tolerance for risk. It depends on your financial literacy, because you have to know how these things works. You have to look at the agreement that you're signing, what could go wrong with it. This isn't something that just anybody should take on just to get more Bitcoin. I think you should do a lot of due diligence before going into something like this. And the nice thing about a home equity line of credit is you can get a much better rate than 10% as well, or 12%, I guess this is. You can get it for 5 or 6%, whatever your mortgage is, probably max there. And that's even a bigger spread there. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I'm not a huge advocate of loaning against your Bitcoin to buy more Bitcoin. I just think that that's a vicious cycle, that you should just focus your time and energy on adding value to the world and converting that value into Bitcoin. It seems like a more long-term strategy to me. And that's kind of how I look at it, but everybody's different.
It's so much less stressful.
It is less stressful. Yeah. The other thing too, though, is, you do get to stick it to the fiat system a little bit by borrowing money.
I saw your video on that.
Yeah. By borrowing fiat, you make the problem of fiat worse. You're creating more money out of thin air, and you're buying a hard asset with it, which is nice. It's like self-preservation and acceleration of the destruction of the fiat system, which is pretty sweet. But you're talking about leveraging 10%. That is, your mind is in the right place when you're thinking about this. If you're thinking about that sort of amount, right? There's people that go way further out on the risk spectrum, and then you're really at risk. At 10%, you're going to be able to handle the majority of the risks that come associated with a lending and borrowing. So you got the right mindset around it. The other thing that's kind of cool with these products is that it's the amount that you're able to borrow is based off of the value of the asset that you're securing against. And if the value goes up of that asset, then you're able to borrow more, which is kind of like, Jor talked about a HELOC. That's not really going to happen with a HELOC, because like you're able to maybe borrow more, but it's only at the house appreciation, the appreciation of the value of the home. And then you kind of need to there's probably more steps to do that through a bank and mortgage system to refinance a HELOC that you've already set up. Whereas with these Bitcoin lending programs, you can refinance just like at any point. So if you wanted to take out more because the value of your Bitcoin has gone up, you can do that. But then you're increasing your leverage, and that's just something you got to be aware of. But it is kind of a cool system to be able to just constantly sort of play with the LTV, the loan to value, when the price of Bitcoin fluctuates.
I do think lending or borrowing against Bitcoin is smart in certain situations, though. So let's say, for example, you have Bitcoin, you lose your job, and you have some kind of loan that you have to pay for, or your roof gets destroyed and you need to pay for it. And you have enough of a stack to actually pay for it with your Bitcoin if you borrow against it. In that case, you're better off compared to, let's say, getting a payday loan. Payday loan is going to charge you like 300% or something like that, right? So in this case, getting a 12% loan is worth it. But if you can go to your bank, you could probably get a cheaper loan.
Yep. Yeah, you can.
With Bitcoin, your Bitcoin is your credit. That's one of the things that you need to pay attention to. Yes. If you go to your bank, you may not be able to get a loan if you don't have a job. So that's something that could hurt you. So if you have Bitcoin, you can, for a fact that you have that loan, but use it as a last effort. Don't use it as the first thing that you do.
Agree with that. Yeah, that's something I think people need to really switch their brains from. The world that we live in now, everybody's obsessed with credit scores. The bank looks at your last 3 years of income, your references. It's like, if you have Bitcoin, that's all you're going to need in the future. Because if you miss a loan payment, that's going to be built into your loan as the collateral there. And if you miss a payment, they're just going to sell some Bitcoin, because it is a global asset with global liquidity. And if they want to sell that Bitcoin, then they can in about 2 minutes. So it's not going to matter what your credit score is in the future. And that's why it's so important to have Bitcoin and get as much as you can right now, because when this system, as this plays out, you're going to be ready for that. And everybody else is going to be playing catch up, and you're just going to be light years ahead of everybody else, all of your peers. So that's pretty cool. It's a good experiment. I think we're going to spend a lot more time talking about the lending and the future of the banking system, stuff like that going forward here. But there's a question here from Tariq. And I was preparing this while we were chatting here, but Tariq says, hey guys, without being conservative, what do you guys think the buying power of 10 million sats will be in 10 years time? So this is the reverse CAGR calculator, the website. So I used $103,000 Bitcoin price today. I used a 50% CAGR. I think that's probably, it's not conservative, but it's not low, definitely. So I'd say 50 is realistic. You can change that too. You can play with this website and see for yourself. 10 years. So it looks like in 10 years from now, at a 50% compound annual growth rate, the price of Bitcoin is going to be $5.9 million. So that 10 million sats will be worth $593,000, which you could buy for approximately $10,000 US today.
And the cool thing there is you have $593,000 worth of assets. So now you can go to your bank, and if you pledge 5% of it as collateral, so if you pledge like 25K worth of it as collateral, you can now take on a $12,000 loan, $12,500 loan. So you borrowed more, and you basically extracted the value out of your Bitcoin. You borrowed more than you put in the first place.
That's awesome.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I thought that
Yeah.
was
That's 10 years
awesome.
away, boys. Like this, again, this isn't like 1,000 years from now. Like let's even look at the 20 years out and see what that looks like. So that is what is this? I wish they would put commas on here. So 501. So $342 million worth in 20 years from now. I think that's right. 342 million. So that would be $3.34 million in 20 years. Again, these are just estimates. We are not saying that this is going to happen for sure. It might be higher than that though. Like I saw somebody in the chat here said like all models are destroyed. There's never been an asset like Bitcoin before. We've never had anything with absolute scarcity before. Gold would be the closest, but we've always been able to find more gold. As the demand goes up for gold, we find more gold. We can't do that with Bitcoin. So we have no comparatives here. There's nothing to compare to what's about to play out with anything in prior history before. So this could be high, this could be low. We have no idea, but it is kind of cool based on what we've seen the last 10 years to kind of project that out into the future.
I think the biggest problem with that, with the price projections in the future, is that we're measuring it with a broken ruler. We're measuring it with fiat dollars, and we don't know what the pricing power of $34 million is at that point, right? That's the part that really kind of falls apart.
Rajat, you're blurry.
Oh, there you go. Oh,
Are you
kind
mad
of
at
worked.
the camera or something?
I want to ask you guys, do you think we're going to have diminishing returns?
Yes.
You think so?
I don't know.
I don't know if I used to think that we would, but I've kind of switched on that as well. Why is this thing still blurry? That's so weird.
We're not going to be diminishing for a long time. Like that's like it's been 60% for the last 10 years. I really think it's going to be higher than 60% for the next 10 years. But at some point, it is going to start going down from like, let's say 80 to 60 to 40 to 20. It's never going to be like 5, I don't think, within the next 1,000 years, probably. It's going to outperform everything because everything's going to be repriced by it. It's the only thing with absolute scarcity. And so anything that's made, anything exists, anything that will exist in the future will all be priced in a scarce asset that is Bitcoin. So I think it'll go down. I just don't see a world where it could, like, why do you think it won't go down?
So I thought that before. I thought it could go down. I thought it will go down because every asset does go down. It goes back to what you were saying there. We can find more dollars. We can print more dollars to put into Bitcoin. And so the way that I see it, if Bitcoin goes to $1 million, more people are going to want it than they want it today.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If it goes to $10 million, more people are going to want it than they want it today. If it goes to $100 million, more people will want it than they want it today. And we've talked about this before on the channel. As Bitcoin's price goes up, you have to sell less of it to make ends meet, to pay for your expenses. So over time, the supply, I think more and more Bitcoin is just being locked away and it'll never need to be sold. So let's say somebody has 10,000 Bitcoin today. If it goes to $100 million, now they have so much wealth that they never have to sell all their Bitcoin. They don't have to. Unless they really want to mess with the market, they don't have to sell it. So they're going to be selling smaller and smaller chunks of Bitcoin. Available supply is going to decrease, but demand is going to increase. So if the US dollar, like I mentioned before, if the US dollar loses 99% of its value, it can lose another 99%. Then it could lose another 99%. So because of how Bitcoin works, if Bitcoin increases in price by 30%, the US dollar would lose 30% or whatever. it could lose another 30% the following year, and then it could lose another 30%, and it could lose another 30%. On the other hand, with real estate, with stocks, the people who want those things already have them. So as the price goes up, they are okay with selling. And there's a time limit for how long they should hold them, because you expect it to be used for your retirement. With Bitcoin, we expect it to be used for the next 1,000 years. Like just what you said there, the next 1,000 years, Bitcoin is going to be around. So we expect it'll be around. So we want to keep as much of it as we can. And I think Bitcoiners in general they want to create more value, so they don't have to sell their Bitcoin. And that just, again, that's another angle where it decreases the amount of Bitcoin that's available. I know there's going to be people who are selling. There's definitely going to be people who are selling, but over time, the number of people who are selling is going to run out.
Yes. Here's a cool thing though. And I heard this the other day, and actually before we changed the title of the show to be about treasury companies today, this was one of the topics that I wanted to get into anyways. Just battling.
You might have to turn your camera off and on.
Oh,
or
maybe
something.
I'll disconnect it. Yeah.
But I heard somebody say, I think it was actually Danny Knowles on What Bitcoin Did podcast the other day. He referred to Bitcoin as Hotel California. And I love that. I think that that's going to be a topic that I dive a little bit further into. And essentially the idea there is that once you understand Bitcoin, it's similar to the green light theory that I have, is like, once you understand Bitcoin, you never go back to the fiat system. It's not like you spend 1,000 or 10,000 hours in Bitcoin. You're like, you know what? It's not really for me. I'm going to go back and start saving my money in fiat dollars again. So it's, in that sense, it's like Hotel California, where you check in and you never leave. I think the quote was, somebody said at the top, you can check out anytime, but you never really leave. So it's one of those things where the demand is going to continue going up forever, because once people get here, they don't leave. They understand it. They stay here, and that amount, the higher the top line there, the people in Bitcoin who understand Bitcoin, essentially at the Hotel California, as the number of guests increases, they're all fighting for the scarce amount of sats. So it's just going to get harder and harder to get, and the price is just going to continue going up and up and up forever. But I do think there's going to come a point where it start going down. I just don't see that maybe in our lifetimes even.
Yeah. Hey, guys, we're only going to do this stream for another like 10 minutes or so, right? Yeah. So we should hit these two questions from 3-9s. Yeah. Make sure we get the super chats done. So yeah.
I got a couple things here quickly though. First, I just shared a link there. Somebody was talking about Misty. So we actually shared a video on Maple Bitcoin channel a couple weeks ago. It was our best performing video yet. It has 23,000 views talking about Misty. So I just shared the link if you want to deep dive on MSTY, one of the strategy, I guess not strategy products, but a product built around strategy. And don't forget also, we got a lot of people watching from all 4 channels here, but make sure if you're not yet, go over and subscribe to our Maple Bitcoin channel. We had a huge influx from the stream last week. We are going to eventually phase out of streaming this from our individual channels, so we don't want you to miss out on that. So you might as well just, if you got a couple seconds here, go over to Maple Bitcoin there and subscribe. And a couple other things here. We got 821 sats from Frank. So thank you, Frank. We got 888 sats from Paul. Thank you, Paul. We got 1,116 sats from Rajesh. Maple collab is proper perspective. Lots of love from India.
Nice.
Rajesh. And a fatty. Look at this. from E&E. Another row of boobies, he says. Row of boobies. Friday night squeeze. 33,333 sats. Wow. So thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ian. Those pretty much make the show, I mean, not worth our time, but it definitely helps a lot. So thank you both for that. That's very meaningful there. And one more here. We are on Zapstream too right now. And MIX is asking if Maple Bitcoin has a website. We do not, but we're actually in the process of putting together our own little community. So Maple Bitcoin is going to have our own community on School we're going to be using. We're kind of in the first stages of building it out, but it's probably going to be available, I think, in the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for that. It's going to be, we're going to share a lot of different resources in there. We're going to do like a private show, I think, once a month for community members only. So that's coming soon.
Let's get to these last two.
Yeah, we got 3 9s here. Rajat
Yes.
said if Warren Buffett put his cash into Bitcoin, he could get 3.3 million Bitcoin. But CoinGlass says only 2.08 million Bitcoin are on the exchanges. Mind-blowing revelation.
I will just say that the Bitcoin on exchanges doesn't mean that they're actually for sale either. And the other thing that people do is they hold Bitcoin in wallets, and then when they're ready to sell, they move that to exchanges, and price will drive them to move the Bitcoin to an exchange. So the Bitcoin on exchanges sort of graph and metric doesn't really mean as much as people think it does. Like maybe people that don't have, maybe haven't been here long enough, put a lot of importance on that. And I think it's one piece of information combined with other things. Like it is meaningful that is going down and all of that. Like that is meaning that people are moving their Bitcoin off of exchanges, whether to take self-custody or to sell it, right? Well, it is always to take self-custody. Even the person that buys it takes self-custody. That's why it's leaving the exchanges. But that doesn't mean that that's the only Bitcoin available for sale. Price drives out new sellers.
Yeah, that's a great point. That could increase at any time. That number could go from 2.08 to 5 very quickly. If the price goes up enough, it could. But then again, it goes back to that concept where Warren Buffett's company, Berkshire Hathaway, today they have $350 billion worth of cash. So, or 350 or 317 or something like that. But they could buy, this is a video that I made yesterday, they could buy 3.3 million Bitcoin today. But they're not going to be able to, because if they try to buy 3.3 million Bitcoin, let's say they try to go and buy it all in one shot and they try to get it all at the current price, they're not going to be able to, because I've mentioned this so many times, Bitcoin runs out at every price. So the Bitcoin that's available at this price, the current price is determined by a very small number of buyers and sellers. That's the margin price. That's the equilibrium price. That's the price that's on the market right now. That could change at any time.
And it does. It changes every sell. Every buy and every sell changes it.
Second. Yeah, exactly. It's changing constantly. So if Warren Buffett were to go and try to buy even 100,000 Bitcoin on the market, he's not going to be able to get it. Right?
Yeah,
if he tries to buy even, actually, maybe we should talk more about OTC desks. This is what OTC desks are available for. The sellers don't want to sell their Bitcoin on the market because it brings the price down. Buyers don't want to buy their Bitcoin on the market, huge buyers, because it brings the price up. That's what OTC desks are for. They facilitate those transactions. So if Warren Buffett wants to buy 3.3 million Bitcoin, he won't be able to. That's just the cash that he has. So the cash that he has today is worth 3.3 billion or 3.3 million Bitcoin. Eventually it'll be worth 1 million. Then it'll be worth 500,000. Then it'll be worth 300, 200, 100,000.
Yeah. Well, what's really interesting about this is there's this idea of cost of acquisition of Bitcoin, right? The current price of Bitcoin is not the cost of acquiring like a high amount of Bitcoin. So, we started this entire conversation talking about strategy, like MSTR and Bitcoin treasury companies, and we value their net asset, the amount of Bitcoin they have, at the current dollar price. But if a company, if Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway wanted to buy even 591,000 Bitcoin, it would cost them a lot more than the 591,000 Bitcoin that we're evaluating just at its current spot price of First Strategy's balance sheet. Right? There's a cost of acquisition, because just as Rajat said, every buy is going to increase even a small amount, but it all adds up. It's going to increase the price because that needs to drive out new sellers to fulfill those orders.
Yes. Jor, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you guys did a really good job covering that. I don't really have a whole lot to add, so I don't want to waste people's time here. It's, as we head into this with the exchanges, with the amount of Bitcoin available, I think that the amount of Bitcoin that's actually available right now would blow people's minds. And if people knew how, we haven't been through the scarcity aspect of Bitcoin, but we will. And I think once we reach that point, that's when Bitcoin, we see like the real steep curve in the S curve. I think that when people realize how scarce this asset is, because again, it's still kind of conceptual at this point where, yes, we know it's absolute scarcity, but we haven't really felt that yet, right? Because there's going to come a day where you're just not able to trade fiat dollars for Bitcoin. And at that point, people will realize how scarce this is and how important this asset is. When we get to that point, boys, we're going to be laughing. We're going to be laughing because there's never been anything like that in history. And I know I say that a lot, but I think it's important for people to really understand that when you're looking into the future, when you're thinking about what the price is going to be, it's not so much about the price of it. It's what it's going to be able to buy you and what people are going to give for your sats in the future. That's what you should be thinking about versus the price of Bitcoin, the fiat price. And so I'm looking forward to a day. I'm kind of nervous about it, but I'm looking forward to the day where you can't trade fiat dollars for Bitcoin anymore. And I really don't think that we're that far away in the big picture.
Yeah. Jamie's just mentioned there, what about if they're bought via an OTC desk? The OTC desks actually have to get Bitcoin as well in order to sell it to Warren Buffett, because if there's not enough, if there isn't 3.3 million Bitcoin, it doesn't matter who you buy it from. Even the OTC desks, they have to get Bitcoin at the current market price. They have to find people who are willing to sell at the current market price in order to give it to you. Because Bitcoin has a finite supply, it doesn't matter where you buy it from. The OTC desks can't give you 3.3 million Bitcoin if 3.3 million Bitcoin aren't available.
Yeah, they have to go source that Bitcoin. They might do it through exchanges. They might buy some of it on exchanges. They might buy it personally, peer to peer, from different large holders they know that they deal with. They might have been buying it, all the time and holding a certain amount and being able to be ready to sell that to their customers that deal with them through the OTC desks.
Yep.
But it does have an effect on the market. It's just different. It affects the market differently. And it's oftentimes not as much effect. And people think, oh, this is huge manipulation through OTC desks. They still have to source the Bitcoin. There still ends up being these supply crunches that happen, even for OTC buyers and sellers.
Yeah.
Yes. Good info there, boys. Maverick says, is there a website I can verify my transactions with a public address? Verified through Sparrow, but want a second verification. Yes, check out mempool.space. This is a really, really solid resource for anybody in Bitcoin, whether you're following a transaction, whether you want to learn a little bit more. You can learn things about the Lightning Network and get the statistics on here using this little lightning bolt up top. You can look at the mining information, the hash rate. You can go a little bit further into. This is my favorite chart in all of Bitcoin, which is the Bitcoin hash rate, the energy going into the Bitcoin network. And so this is mempool.space. Very good resource for, and so what you do there essentially is you just go to the website, you type in your Bitcoin address, or you pasted it right into the top here. It says explore the full Bitcoin ecosystem. Just paste your address into there. You got to be careful though. You don't want to be doing that in public spots. Make sure you're doing that on a secure network so nobody can really, well, depends how paranoid you are, but that's, I think, just a good piece of advice there.
You are publicly doxing your address to your browser and to mempool.space. Yes. Unless you run your own node, you can run your own private local mempool, and you can put in whatever information on there. And the only person you're leaking information to is your own node. So that's what I personally do. And I run my own mempool.
Yes. Great call there, Forrest. Great call. One more here that I want to share, which is our channel, Maple Bitcoin YouTube channel. So we kind of mentioned it a couple times here, but we do want people to make the transition over to our YouTube channel instead of our individual channels for future shows and things. We got a lot going on there, a weekly stream, and we share a couple of videos every week. So make sure if you're not subscribed there yet, please go ahead and do so. Let's get to this last question, which is another one from 39. So 39's feeling very generous today, a couple $5 super chats. Which the question here is, how much Bitcoin is enough? Do you take your net worth divide by M2 money supply equals X Bitcoin divided by 21 hard cap? I'm not sure about that formula there, but what do you guys think about how much Bitcoin is enough right now?
Just keep buying.
Yeah, it's whatever money you can't afford to lose, you buy Bitcoin with. That's like my favorite quote. Because usually it's the other way around. Oh, only invest what you can lose. It's quite the opposite with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is going to be the safest thing that you can buy. This is such a crazy thing. I just made this a video that I tried to say, like people think like treasury bonds are the safest thing, to hold, right, as an investment. Long-term treasury bonds are the most risky thing you could buy, and short-term treasury bonds are probably safer than Bitcoin. But if you have a 4-year time horizon, if you're investing for the long term, Bitcoin is the safest thing you can buy. It's really hard to wrap your mind around that. So how much is enough? It's really dependent on your own what you have. But to me, everything I have is in Bitcoin. Everything I can't afford to lose is in Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think that what people should be more focused on right now, obviously getting sats is good, but we keep saying it. Every show you listen to about Bitcoin, anybody who understands Bitcoin will tell you that we are incredibly early right now. And so you're still in a unique position in world history where you can trade fiat dollars for Bitcoin. So any chance you can, do that. Create as much value as you can, store your wealth in Bitcoin. But the one thing that you should be focused on here, as we look at these projections 10 years out, 20 years out, everything that's coming here, using it as collateral in the future, being able to live off your Bitcoin, the thing that you should be focused most on is protecting the sats that you have. And there are no thresholds for doing that. You shouldn't say, I'm going to wait till I have 20 million sats before I take my Bitcoin security seriously. You should be taking, no matter how much you have, whether that's 1 million, 2 million sats, you should at least start thinking about it, start putting a plan in place, start expanding your knowledge around Bitcoin security and private key management and UTXO management, all these different things. That's what you need to be focused on right now, because if you build the right foundation right now, regardless of how many sats you have, if you protect those for the next 100 years, your family is going to be in a much, much, much better place than you just focusing on the price or trying to get more instead of actually protecting the sats that you have today.
Yep.
Well said.
Okay, boys. Well, it's about that time. Do you guys have any final thoughts here before we wrap things up for the week? Another week?
Yes, I do. So right now on my chat, I see 176 concurrent viewers. So right now there are 176 people watching. If you can, leave a thumbs up. Really helps with sharing our content with other people. More people will watch. More people will see what Bitcoin is. I mean, that's the best way to spread the knowledge. I think more people who own Bitcoin, the less opposition you have when Bitcoin actually becomes the world reserve currency. So we want people to actually own it. We want people to benefit from it. So leave a thumbs up. It's free. Doesn't cost you anything. Just do it.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Forrest?
Nope, that's it. Thumbs up. And if you wanted to donate to the show, keep supporting us. There's a value for value QR code there that you can scan with a Lightning wallet and send us some sats, and also the written out code there, maplebitcoin@coinos.io. And appreciate everybody for sending sats and the super chat, and just thanks for coming on and chatting, giving us great questions. It's nice to have these questions and to prompt us to explore areas we might not have, or explore more in depth. We're on this knowledge journey together, learning about Bitcoin all together. So it's a fun time, and thanks everyone for being here.
Yes. I do have one more actually I see we lost about 40 people in the last couple of minutes here. So for those who stuck around, you're going to be rewarded at a chance to win some free sats. So we do now have a referral code from Maple Bitcoin. We are not sponsored by them. We all just use Bitcoin Well. We love what they do here, especially if you're in Canada. We believe that Bitcoin Well is the best way to buy Bitcoin. There's a lot of unique features that are available nowhere else. And one of the cool things is you can actually play a game to toss a coin into a wishing well. And so what we're going to do here is the first person watching today to scan this QR code on screen is going to win some free sats, courtesy of our friends at the Bitcoin Well. So here we go. We're going to toss it.
And they are available. There's a question there at EB. They are available in the US as well. They have a few different services in the US compared to Canada, but they're available in the US too.
Yes. And so they are available in Canada and the US. And as Forrest alluded to there's a couple things in Canada that you can't do in the US, which are really cool. So you got free swaps. You can do lightning withdrawals. There's a couple other things. You can pay bills with your Bitcoin. So you can take slow steps away from the fiat system using something like Bitcoin Well. So there you have it. If you're in Canada or the US, make sure you use that referral code. It's another way to support the show without actually giving us any of your hard-earned money. You can just sign up, buy Bitcoin, and we'll get a very small percentage of that from Bitcoin Well. That's how she works. So anyways, thanks, fellas. Another great stream today. These are awesome. They go way too fast. Thanks, everybody, for showing up today, supporting us, both financially through sats and with comments and everything and likes. And yeah, we'll be back here next Friday, 2 p.m. Keep an eye out for the channel. We got lots of great videos and more to come. And we're going to have some information on our new school community too, which I think there's going to be a lot of interest from. So thanks, fellas. Have yourselves an amazing Friday and a great weekend. And we will See you next week.